So here we go. Cho'Gall. We're going to do this in 2 phases. We're going to do Cho first, and then we'll do Gall. If you watch this on YouTube, there'll be timestamps so that you can go through each, okay? So we're going to be focusing on the main part, Surging Fist. Think about this as if you're a tank, and this is your mobility to get in or out of situations. The only problem is it's a channel. Sometimes you just fast cast this and give yourself a little bit of boost. Sometimes you use this for damage, which is going to be the main build that we talk about, and I'll give you the alternatives. Your W, ignite nearby enemies, dealing 150 damage over 50 seconds. Basic attack, reignite them. Cho is healed for 40 damage when an enemy is ignited. The more things you're around, the more things you hit with your W, the more you heal, okay? It's okay to be in the thick of things. The bomb, hopefully you're in sync with your Gall, because you're not going to be going rollback build, so they better hit it on their way out. And then your trait, you activate this. I love, as a Cho player, to keep armor up, especially unless I'm really good with my teammate. I'm probably going to have this up most of the time because I do a ton of damage, and the way that you're going to play Gall is pretty important. Shadow Flame, super easy, just point and click. This thing's on a 3-second cooldown, cast it whenever. Redetonate the bomb. This is the big one, Dread Orb. It really comes into play, and you're going to be prioritizing your build around that. Only take Ogre Rage if you're doing camps when you're not near fights or the enemy damage isn't a super threat. All right, and then there's a couple things that we'll talk about. So let's go. Level 1 with Cho'Gall is Calloused Hide. This used to be really broken in OP. They've nerfed it enough, but it's still good, all right? While under 60% maximum health, Cho gains 15% increased movement speed and healing received. No matter what, this is good. Your biggest weakness is mobility. And while your Surging Fist is good, it doesn't mean that it can't be interrupted. Also, we should quickly note that with Gall, you do have Shove, which is a small nudge that can be used during CC. If you, not during stasis, but let's say you're being mosh pit. Man, sure wish I had somebody to nudge me out of this. This does work, and you can use this, and you can get yourself out of this. This should be used more as a safety measure as opposed to an offensive measure. So always keep that in mind, but make sure you're not shoving one way while the guy is Surging Fist the other direction. All right, back to level 1. Calloused Hide. Your biggest weakness is mobility. This allows you to take some damage and then get out of there, or alternatively make plays. Also receive that bonus healing to get out of there. Now, I actually don't mind the other talents. Consuming Fire is good versus like groups, like heavy group comps. The Will of Cho would probably be good on Tomb, and that's about it. All right, I don't think that's actually super terrible either. It just means that you're kind of AFK farming. But Calloused Hide, really, really strong. Allows you to do a bunch of crazy stuff. And this is kind of the one that's still good. If this was the old one, I'd be like, dang, man, this character's broken. Right now, it's just good. Level 4. Now, there's 2 talents here that are really good, but we're going to focus primarily on Surging Fist build. Now, I wouldn't run this versus an Uther style comp, because the minute I start winding up my fist, Uther drops a hammer on me, and it sucks, all right? Both of these are good. Both of these can be used in a lot of situations, but both of them have very big weaknesses. CC is your biggest weakness as Cho, so Seared Flesh and Uppercut. Uppercut. Now, this was also nerfed. Hitting an enemy hero with Surging Fist deals additional damage to heroes equal to 5% of their maximum health and reduces the cooldown of Surging Fist by 5 seconds. Surging Fist is a 12-second cooldown. If I hit 3 people, I have it back instantly, which means I'll just queue back and forth like I'm the Swiffer sweeper, okay? I'll go back and forth through them. If I hit 2 people, there's a downtime, and I'm okay with that. It just means that I can really make some... I'm trying to hit 2 people most of the time. If I hit 1, this is still a 7-second cooldown. So now that mobility weakness that I have, unless I get CC'd before I use this, I'm going to be okay. The cooldown on this means that you're going to go through and do 5% damage to a bunch of people a lot of times. It's pretty nutty, and once you learn how to kind of re-angle yourself and use this, it's really good. Now, in the times where there's a lot of CC in those situations, I do like Seared Flesh. Each consecutive basic attack to enemy heroes deals 20% damage more to a maximum of 60%. This bonus lasts 5 seconds until a non-heroic enemy is attacked, meaning that you have to continually attack heroes, and this works really good on tanks. Tanks rarely can stand there and just tank infinite damage, and this means that you scale up a lot. Cho actually has really strong auto attacks. So even if you don't go this, you should be very proactive with auto attacking and weaving it in between your uppercut or your surging fist with uppercut and a lot of those things. So I like both of these talents. Uppercut's the one we're going to focus on, but both of these are really good. Rollback is if you were playing in 2018. Don't pick it unless you're like already have a tank and you're playing some weird range build. Level 7. Power Surge. And this is another really good one. Enemy heroes who are hit by Surging Fist, meaning that you're going to be doing this a lot, are slowed by 30% for 2.5 seconds. Gain 15% movement speed while charging Surging Fist and for 2.5 seconds after casting the ability. So that mobility thing is now going to be pretty good because as long as you just cast it, you have 15% movement speed. You don't even have to be under 60% for that, but you still get the bonus healing. So this means that those people you're on top of, 30% slow for 2.5 seconds is actually a pretty long slow and a pretty decent slow for that time period. Getting the movement speed while it's charging means it's another way to escape or engage depending on how you're using this. You can use this and wind it up and look like you're going at the enemy team, and then all of a sudden you realize it's not that good. You just go the other direction. There's nothing stopping you. Fire Starter would be good if you did find that rare time where the Will of Cho is good. But Enraged Regeneration, each time Cho hits an enemy hero with an ability or basic attack, he heals for 60 over 3 seconds. Enemy heroes hit by Gall's Dread Orb receive 35% less healing. This would be good if you're playing versus a heavy melee comp and there's a lot of AoE healing, or there's like in a short period of time, or you're going against like a Brightwing to where you would hit this and you see that somebody's coming in. It is a little slow to get that orb out, but if they're right on top of you, it's not that bad. This does make it pretty good as a result. Not only that, but because this is anytime you hit an enemy hero with an ability or basic attack, this is more sustain healing. But if you don't need that extra healing, Power Surge is really good. Level 10. Both of these are really good, and I mean both of them are really good. Upheaval I don't like as much as I do Hammer of Twilight, but that's not to say that Upheaval isn't just like the go-to pick. Its level 20 is also really powerful, but if you miss this, it's not the end of the world because it's a 40-second cooldown and we'll be speccing into a heroic cooldown talent later. Hammer of Twilight, however, is a 15-second cooldown. The other part about this, your basic attacks deal 25% increased damage. This has a nice little AoE sweep, which means that you can stun people and get away. You can knock people away and you can control a lot of fights with Hammer of Twilight. This is a nice stun on a 15-second cooldown, which you can reposition yourself. Imagine yourself, you queue in and then you get behind somebody and you knock them back into your team. You're trying to retreat, somebody's coming at you, you just hit that. There's multiple ways. Not only that, but Gall with his Shadow Flame will be using it to dismount if somebody's running at you, which can also help you give you that extra half second, dismount them, knock them away, and you're going to be fine. So I do like Hammer of Twilight for most situations. Upheaval is good against groups that might have double range, that have limited mobility, or that you can capitalize on with your team. If I pull in people and I don't have people to follow it up, it feels really bad. So Upheaval can be bad in certain situations, whereas Hammer of Twilight is rarely ever bad. Tanks coming at my team, knock them back. 15-second cooldown, done. We have more than enough time to buy the cooldown on this. 13. Now this one's a little tricky because if you are playing against a Malthael, you're kind of screwed because you're forced to go Molten Block because this allows you to enter stasis to be able to eat Last Rites. Now if they didn't pick Last Rites, then you're okay. But Molten Block is needed if you are playing against finishing style heroics. Other than that, Twilight Veil is actually really, really good. Activate to increase the armor bonus of Ogre Hide to 75 for 4 seconds. That's a lot of armor for a long period of time. If cast while Ogre Rage is active, it instantly swaps to Ogre Hide, meaning that you'll instantly swap that back instead of having to hit the D key first. So that does help you, but 75 armor is a lot of armor. And for 4 seconds, it can be the difference between like life and death. Surging Dash, while this is okay, this is kind of more niche in that you have to make sure that you're playing against a poke style team that might have more dots on you, that might be trying to control stuff. But other than that, Surging Dash isn't super great. 16. Now, this is one where you can do multiple different things. Ruined Gauntlet is going to be good. Basic attacks reduce the cooldown of Cho and Gall's heroic abilities by 6%. This is a 15-second cooldown. If I went Upheaval, it's even better. 6% of Hammer of Twilight, I'm just nudging off a couple of seconds with a couple of autos. But that does mean a considerable amount of control. If I auto attack 3 times and I'm getting this type of control in a fight, I'm feeling pretty good about that. I want to be auto attacking whenever I can as it is. Not only that, but I get basic attack damage bonus just by auto attacking with Hammer of Twilight. So Rune Gauntlet, it also plays really well into Gall's heroics, 80 seconds and 60 seconds, which we'll talk about those when we get there, but those are longer cooldowns, and having those available, if you are a proactive Cho'Gall who considers yourself 2 characters in one, you'll find that as much as I don't like heroics that give you cooldown, or talents that give you heroic cooldown, playing around those is actually really good, mostly for Gall. Frenzied Fist gains 75% increased attack speed for 5 seconds after using Surging Fist. You're not normally going to have the time to get more than a couple of auto attacks out, especially if you want the cooldown reduction at level 4. So if you get cooldown reduction, you'll find yourself queuing a lot more than you'll have time to auto attack, even though you'll weave those in. But if you did opt to go Seared Flesh, that could help. But I would still say Ruined Gauntlets is really good. Level 20, all of these are going to be good in some capacity. Cthulhu's Gift, basic attacks become ranged and slow targets by 20%. I don't know if this is necessary. I don't normally think that this is needed to have that extra bit of control. So Fuel for the Flame is a good way to add a lot of damage. Basic attacks against enemies, notice it says enemies, cause them to explode, dealing 21 damage to them and 45 damage to nearby enemies. This damage is doubled against enemy heroes. So this is a considerable amount of damage just by auto attacking, which is already really good. Now, having ranged auto attacks, if you're playing against the team that has been dominating you and putting you in tough situation, of course you're going to go this. But if you feel that you are the one in control of the fight, it's good. Now, if you did go Upheaval, Favor of the Old Gods is really, really good if you land your Upheaval. Now, if you didn't, then it's not the end of the world because you have a 40-second cooldown and you have cooldown reduction. So you might get a couple of swings at that if you missed the first time. Hour of Twilight, rarely do I anticipate dying, so I don't normally pick this because, I mean, if I pick talents that keep me alive, then I'm not worried about having a cooldown reduction, because no matter what, if I die, my team probably dies. And if I die, my team probably retreats. Me coming back sooner doesn't really do anything this late in the game, and it's a very rare circumstance where you would snap lock this in a dire moment that is game saving, and therefore I'm not a big fan of it. So all of these are going to be good. For Cho, Calloused Hide, Uppercut or Seared Flesh, Uppercut being the priority, Power Surge or Enraged Regeneration, Hammer of Twilight, Twilight Veil first, Molten Block if necessary, Ruined Gauntlet, and, well, Cthulhu's or Fuel for the Flame. And if I went Upheaval, high consideration for Favor of the Old Gods. Switching over to Gall. Taskmaster. I don't know if there's ever a time where Taskmaster isn't the go-to pick. Having that extra bit of mobility on a 30-second cooldown and then having Taskmaster reduce that, you're always going to be auto-attacked. There's nothing that's going to not auto-attack you. So having this extra bit of cooldown reduction can be the difference between living, creating plays, making a lot more plays. And if you're in sync with your teammate, especially if you're in comms, this goes from good to even great when Taskmaster's already really good. I don't really like Keep Moving, although it's not really that bad. These level 1 talents that just feel underwhelming. Eye of Kilrog, you should be using these as we talk about some of the abilities here. Eye of Kilrog is kind of that extra button that you have. Put this in bushes, put this around places that can't easily be attacked. And give yourself vision to protect from flanks or to set things up. There's multiple ways you should use this, most notably keeping an eye on flanks or creating opportunities. You don't need this talent to pick it. It's just, it was an opportunity to talk about it. Taskmaster, really good. Level 4. Now, I mentioned before, we're no longer going the rollback, and as such, we're not going bombs away. The only time I would really consider going bombs away in the rollback would be if I'm playing on Braxis, just so I had extra wave clear and a crazy amount of cooldown reduction, which comes by Cho's level 16, which would be 1 second cooldown per enemy hit, which means anything can be hit. 2 seconds for each enemy hero hit. So if I was playing on Braxis, I would consider that for the sake of wave clear and wave clear only. But the main priority target is the Dread Orb build. This thing is really good. And this thing is kind of broken at 16, which is what makes this Cho. If you get a Cho'Gall that's even talent tiers and they get to 16 around the same time, Cho'Gall has one of the biggest power spikes because of the Dread Orb build. Each bounce of Dread Orb increases its radius by 25% and damage by 15%. The big part is activate Dread Orb before the second bounce ends to reverse its direction of the third bounce. Now, when you couple this with the 16, anybody that's fighting near, on, or around Cho'Gall has a miserable time. And I mean miserable time. Not only that, but with the Cho build, he's going to be much more active with moving around. So being able to get bombs off doesn't feel as strong. You're a much more proactive Cho'Gall by going into these. So as the Gall, you have to remember to reactivate this. You'll see it go out and then come back. And the big part is because some of the other talents that we'll talk about in just a moment. At level 7, now this one's a little bit tricky because if you are in sync with your Cho'Gall and you can bounce your trait back and forth, Ogre Rampage is really good. It really requires some synergy to do this because if you're taking trait when you shouldn't and the other person's not taking trait when they should, you just die and you don't do any damage when you're dead. Each time Gall damages an enemy hero, this bonus is increased by 1% up to 10%. The other ones, this is kind of a weaker spot to be in. Edge of Madness can be really good if you're playing against those frontliners that like to sit up there for a long time. Edge of Madness is really good. These aren't bad talents. It just kind of requires you to consider what you're doing. Every subsequent hit of Shadow Flame against the same enemy hero deals an additional 12% damage, stacking 5 times up to 60%. These bonuses are lost if the hero has not been hit for 7 seconds. Considering this is a 3-second cooldown, you'll have multiple seconds or multiple attempts to use this. I don't mind Double Trouble. This does give you cooldown reduction. I just think that Edge of Madness, if you are playing correctly and you're staying on top, I mean, if you're playing against like a Diablo, for example, that's a big hitbox and it's really easy to hit this. Then you're just stacking this up and you're keeping it going. If you find that your Cho is kind of all over the place, it might not be as good. And you might want to opt for Double Trouble because he will be on top of those heroes that do ignite them, and then you can use Shadow Flame on them. So it does kind of depend on that. I would say Ogre Rampage, if you're in sync, it means you're taking trait much more often and it makes things good. All right, so which talent at level 10? Because both of these are good in their own right. Twisting Nether is a huge playmaker. Massive playmaking talent. After 1 second, nearby enemies are slowed by 50% while you channel up to 5 seconds. You reactivate this or wait for it to explode and you do a huge amount of damage. And that's really good. That's really, really good. The level 20 makes things pretty insane. All right. So there's a lot that you can do with Twisting Nether as well. Shadow Bolt Volley does kind of mean that you're going into Shadow Bolt, the upgrade at level 20. After 1 second, unleash 20 Shadow Bolts over 4 seconds, each dealing 87 damage. This is a tremendous amount of damage. It's also really hard to kind of keep and target because your turn radius is really slow with this. The bolts fire towards your mouse. So you do have to kind of be in sync to kind of maximize this. It's not inconceivable that you can just light up a single target pretty easily. This does get much better at level 20, but Twisting Nether overall means that you're getting into the thick of things and you're trying to get in there and you're going to activate for some sick damage. Don't forget to reactivate it. Level 13. So we're playing more into the Dread Orb build. Each orb is going to increase its radius and damage. You reactivate this and it comes back. Conveniently enough, after the first bounce of Dread Orb, 2 extra bombs bounce to the sides once. So you can reactivate this and you have lots of bombs bouncing around. It's really good. So now you're going to be able to have lots of Dread Orbs going out, which we're still building towards the big 16. Don't really consider the other ones. Consider Dread Orb and the 2 extra balls that are going out. Reactivate them, bounce them back, and watch pure chaos as you hit level 16 and you go Leaden Orb. Dread Orb stuns enemy heroes for 0.75 seconds. If you've ever played a melee versus a Cho'Gall that goes this build, you know that life is miserable and you actually can barely do anything to Cho'Gall because you're just getting beaten down by an orb. Orb is 6 seconds. The duration for the bounce, and the reactivate, and the bounce again, there's very little downtime on this, which means that you're constantly throwing out dread orbs. You should be using this. And when you make it to 16, anybody that tries to be anywhere near you, just cast it at point blank range and reactivate it. Yes, this does have a decent bounce range. And yes, you can use this to get some long range poke or some wave clear as needed. But using this on and around a Cho'Gall is where it really comes into play and makes things really strong. So Dread Orb getting that mini stun, that thing can stun multiple times because of the bounce back, which means that life is really miserable living up and around Cho'Gall. Level 20, if you went Shadow Bolt, the odds that you have to go Shadow Fury are high. But shifting Nether does require you to be in range or in sync with your Cho. Twisting Nether now teleports Cho to a targeted location before it begins channeling. If you use this as a safety measure, you at least have a blink. And remember, your Cho has cooldown reduction at 16, so life's not that bad. But at level 20, if you use this offensively and you don't tell your Cho'Gall or your Cho, it might add for some pretty weird moments, okay? It might add for some pretty weird moments. I will say takedowns permanently increase the bonus of Ogre Rage. Now, if you're not able to use this as much and as often, of course, this isn't going to be really good, which opens up the door. Activate to reduce the cooldowns of Shadow Flame and Dread Orb to 2 seconds for the next 6 seconds. And this is a 30-second cooldown. This is right on the fringe of a late game fight to where there's a 24-second downtime, which means that there are fights at level 20 that should last around 20 to 30 seconds, meaning that you could use this. And the fact that there's a 24-second downtime means that you can use this pretty easily. So Twilight Frenzy is really good in terms of an activatable. It does give you another button to press and to keep track of smashing your buttons with Dread Orb and Shadow Flame, but it could also mean just a boatload of damage and a lot of CC in the right situation. Now, if I'm in sync with my Cho, I'm going Shifting Nether. Else, I'm going to go Twilight Frenzy if I just feel like it's a good, solid pick, which, to be fair, it is. If I went Shadow Bolt and I need Wave Clear and some additional damage, Shadow Fury is where it's at. Not a big fan of Shadow Bolt the same way that I am Twisting Nether, but at the same time, it's a lot safer pick. Instead, if I'm not in control, I don't really play Gall because I can't. So I play Cho, and so if my Gall teleports me without saying anything, that's a problem. So always be careful when using this. Else Twilight Frenzy is really good. So Gall, you're going to be looking at Taskmaster most of the time, Rising Dread all the time, Ogre Rampage if you're in sync. Else either of these are good in the right situation, but I do like Edge of Madness in most generic situations. Twisting Nether mostly for me with a caveat. Twilight Nova into Leaden Orb because the Orb combo is ridiculous. And then playing into potentially Twilight Frenzy or Shifting Nether if the situation calls for it, and Shadow Fury if the situation calls for it. So there, I've done it. The one thing that I said I probably would never do, we finished the Cho'Gall guide. You get 2 heroes in one, and now I need a drink of water.